This week, the House passed House Bill 1491, which would improve early learning and child care requirements. Can you talk more about the bill and what it would mean to Washington families?
Well, I think it'd mean a lot to Washington families. It's a bill I highly support. Matter of fact, I'm a co-sponsor on the bill. And it packs a pretty hefty price tag. It's about $130 million at this point, but it's been scaled down from about $300 million. So it's one of those bills that has been well compromised and well worked by, frankly, Democrats, Republicans, senators, and House members. And we kind of reached conclusion that we couldn't get it all. And frankly, maybe we shouldn't try to get it all in this first bill. This is sort of the first crack at it, though. But we think expanding quality child care and early learning to our families across the state who are mostly in need is a good idea. Those kids start kindergarten and there's an incredible gap between their level of achievement and many of the other kids that are entering kindergarten. And if that gap never really does lessen throughout their whole K-12 career. So the reality is if we can give kids a good head start, we can help empower their parents to be the kids' best and first teachers and frankly their best cheerleaders when it comes to their education. I think that's really important to re-engage parents in this process, make sure that we can help some of our low-income parents or parents who maybe do not have any type of a post-secondary education. We want to try to help empower them to do a great job with their kids and be the best parents they can be and get their kids through school. We think that's really important. So I think the Early Start Act is very important and one that I hope most folks, and frankly about 75% of folks around here do support it. So I'm very hopeful it'll be the best thing we can do for our families and our young families and our kids and actually help our K-12 system in doing so.
Last week, the House passed a bill to increase the state minimum wage to $12 an hour over the next 4 years. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it sounds like a nifty idea, but you know, this state has a really high unemployment rate for our youth. So I think when a kid who's 16, 17, 18 years old can't get a job out there in the market, we do a terrible disservice to that kid. That person's going to grow up and be an adult, and frankly, if they're not able to work, then we have some real problems. So I think we exacerbate the situation by increasing the minimum wage. We already have the highest minimum wage in the country, and I wouldn't be too adverse to bumping that minimum wage up a little bit if in fact we could kind of temper that by offering a training wage for young workers. Maybe some of our fast food chains that typically hire kids, although in the last 10 years during the recession, I think that a lot of people were taking jobs that they were overly qualified for out of necessity. We were in a recession. They needed a paycheck. So I think we had some overqualified people working in minimum wage jobs. And suddenly it sort of set in motion this attitude that the minimum wage should be a family wage job, when in fact I think of the minimum wage as an entry-level wage or a first-time worker wage. And I live on a border county, and so I'm 4 miles away from Oregon. And I shudder to think how many of those types of jobs will just go over the border because you can pay your employees a lot less if we have a really high minimum wage. So again, if I could get a balance with that and try to help our young people be able to get jobs as well, I might be okay with it. But at this point, I'm a pretty firm no on the minimum wage increase.
Wednesday, March 11th was House of Origin cutoff. What does that mean?
Well, the House of Origin is either the House or the Senate, and it means that if you didn't get your bill out by last Wednesday's cutoff date, then your policy bill probably will not proceed. It'll be dead for this session. Of course, it will be introduced at the beginning of the next session again, so you kind of get 2 years to get your bill through. And then again, same with the Senate. So right now, we just had our cutoff on the floor after floor action, so we were working, 12, 14, 16-hour days passing bills off the floor, House bills, that we are now going to refer over to the Senate. And they've done the same to us, and now the whole thing kind of starts over again. But at least we know which bills we're really going to be dealing with, and we're kind of narrowing down the amount of bills that actually have a fighting chance here this year. And of course, if any bill has money attached to it, it's necessary to implement the budget. It's alive until the very last day we're here. I'm Representative Maureen Walsh, and I always appreciate hearing from you and welcome your ideas, comments, and feedback. If I can ever be of assistance to you in any way, please let me know by calling, writing, or sending me an email. I also encourage you to sign up for my email updates from my website, which is on your screen. Thanks for taking the time to listen today. It is an honor to be your state representative.
The cutoff for bills to pass from their House of Origin was March 11th. You had a bill that you were hoping to make it out on the House floor for a vote, but it got stuck in the House Rules Committee. Can you give us an update on House Bill 1352?
Yes, 1352 has to do with energy in the state of Washington. All 1352 says is that if hydroelectric dams improve their efficiency, those utilities that own those dams or use electricity from those dams should qualify for that renewable energy.
Remind us again about Initiative 937.
Well, it passed about 6 years ago, and what it says is that all utilities in the state of Washington have to meet certain requirements, and by 2020, 15% of their portfolio has to be from renewable energy, such as wind and sun, so forth. And so those utilities are trying to reach those mandates, so they're having trouble doing that. First of all, the state of Washington, as citizens here, we're very fortunate because about 70% of our electricity comes from hydroelectric, which actually is renewable. But under the initiative, it says it's not renewable. And you throw in nuclear energy of about 10%, which is almost renewable. We have almost 80% in our state that we have good, cheap, reliable power. So this is forcing utilities to add additional power from other sources, such as very expensive wind and solar. And they're having trouble doing that because they don't need the power. The reason they don't need the power is because of the recession recently, and the load or the requirements for the power are lower than everybody expected. So what it's causing is for customers to pay more than what they really need to for electricity.
There were several bills proposed, including yours, to fix the law. What happened and why didn't they advance?
Well, unfortunately, there's a very powerful group of people in the state of Washington called the Environmental Group, and they have a lot of political clout. One of those bills was simply to call the water that runs through our dams to be renewable. And that isn't going to get very far because of these political pressures. The second bill just created a different pathway. Instead of requiring utilities to go out and purchase expensive wind and solar energy, which is so intermittent, it isn't even base load energy because it's only, the wind only blows once in a while, about 30%. Solar, of course, only works when there's sun. That is not reliable. So they have to go out and even buy additional power to support that. But the need is not there, is the problem. And so as a result of that, we had two PUDs come in and testify. One was from Mason County PUD 3 that said that they spent about $2 million last year for this extra power they didn't use. Grays Harbor County PUD came in and said they spent $8 million for power they did not need. It's just expensive power, and just because the mandate requires it, they're having to pay this money out and they can't use the electricity. So I think it's a real tragedy. We need to fix this problem.
So what happens from here?
Well, we've got about 40 days left in the session. These bills are all being held, and I think the governor is going to weigh in on his cap and trade, and I think there may be an attempt at incorporating some of these bills into a final package if he can get some progress toward cap and trade.
Hello everyone, I'm Brad Klippert, your 8th District State Representative. I just want to say one more time, I am so honored to be one of your voices in Olympia and grateful you have given me this opportunity to serve you. I also appreciate you taking time to watch this short video update. We have officially passed the halfway mark of the 2015 session. We have passed more than 300 bills out of the House of Representatives so far this session, and now we'll begin hearing and voting on Senate bills in the coming days and weeks. This is all leading up to passing an operating budget for the 2015-17 biennium, which I believe we can and should do within a 105-day legislative session. Since my last video update, I am happy to report 3 bills I've prime-sponsored have passed out of the House of Representatives. House Bill 1276 is an omnibus DUI bill and is the result of a DUI task force that met multiple times over the interim. The task force had many members, including those who represented the Washington State Patrol, Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, Washington Judges Association, Washington Traffic Safety Institute, Defense Attorneys Association, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and the Department of Licensing, just to mention a few. This bill includes items such as clarifying the provisions relating to possessing marijuana while in a vehicle, ignition interlock requirements for offenders, and other conditions of release associated with DUI suspects and offenders. Working in law enforcement, I have seen the dangers of impaired driving firsthand. I believe this bill is a good step forward in preventing DUI-related deaths and injuries. I am so thankful for everyone's hard work on this important bill. House Bill 1536 concerning emergency detentions and mental health assessments passed the House with a 97-1 vote. The bill clarifies the timeline of assessments when individuals are transferred to a medical facility for a mental health hold and may require medical treatment. Currently, individuals detained for being a threat to themselves or others are to be assessed by a mental health professional within just 3 hours. Additionally, a facility can hold an individual for no more than 12 hours. This bill provides much needed clarification for the timeline for mental health assessments when there are also medical conditions requiring treatment. As it is now, the 12-hour clock for a mental health hold starts ticking immediately upon an individual's arrival at a medical facility. There should be flexibility to treat medical conditions before the clock starts, and this bill would provide that clarification. House Bill 2017 would create a special license plate that would read, "Washington Farmers and Ranchers, we feed the world." The FFA symbol would be displayed on the left side of the plate with proceeds benefiting FFA education programs. That means we could raise money for education without raising taxes. It passed with an overwhelming support in the House. This bill is the result of a conversation I had with a farmer in our district. By creating a special license plate for farmers and ranchers, we can honor the important contributions of agriculture and the support of the next generation of Washington's farmers, ranchers, and those who support this industry. I look forward to these bills passing in the Senate and being signed into law by the governor. I want to say I'm so thankful for those of you who were able to attend our recent town hall events. If you were unable to join us at one of the events this past weekend, know that we missed you, and you can contact my office directly anytime you want or need to. The most important part of my job is to be a voice for you. You play a critical role in the legislative process, and I am always happy to meet with you on issues important to you or our communities. Finally, I'd like to congratulate the basketball teams from Gonzaga University and Eastern Washington University for their selection in the NCAA tournament. We are all behind you and excited to celebrate your success. Go Zags, go Eags. Thank you again for your time and the opportunity to serve you. May God richly bless each and every one of you. Go out there and have a great Washington Day.
You have a couple bills that are still alive and moving through the legislative process. Talk a little bit about House Bill 1302, the child abduction bill.
On the child abduction bill, what we had going on there was that we had a situation in the city of Pasco where an individual or two individuals were getting a divorce, and one was born in another country. What had happened is the person that was born in the other country took the child and went to the other country, and as a result, they violated the parenting plan for that particular divorce. When they came back, of course, they were able to get the child reunited with the mother, and as a result of that came a court case, and it was called Velez versus the state of Washington. The Supreme Court said that parenting plans, according to how we do the parenting plans in this state, was a term of art, legislative art. We needed to define it more. So that bill has now tightened that loophole up, and this is a companion bill to a bill that I ran a couple of years ago dealing with divorces where parents will tell a child in a divorce that their parent has died, so I'm just taking you away. So this closes the existing loopholes that we know of right now dealing with divorces and the unauthorized taking of children.
Another one of your bills, House Bill 1145, the County Legislative Authority Bill. Why is that important?
This was a result of where Benton County and Franklin County Commissioners needed to get together to discuss how they're going to do emergency operations and emergency communications in the two counties. But state law prohibits them from doing that, along with other businesses that need to be taken care of. If it's happening in those two counties, it's happening statewide. So we need to close that loophole and make sure that when we have joint county business, the county commissioners from both counties or county legislative authorities can get together and resolve the issue in a public open meeting. And the meetings have to be advertised, the subjects have to be advertised. It's just like having a normal county council meeting or county commissioners meeting or even a city council meeting. It has to be advertised so people can attend and they can do business there. So the bill is passed out of the House. It's headed to the Senate. It's now going to be getting a hearing and should be leaving the Senate hopefully in the next couple, 3 weeks for the governor to sign.
Your residency tuition bill, House Bill 1485. Again, talk about this bill.
This is extremely important because it is a game-changing bill for the entire state. We have areas around the state that are designated federally underserved as far as having physician residents, people who have to finish that last 4 years of their medical training in order to become doctors. And Eastern Washington, Central Washington, the Olympic Peninsula, Bellingham, and Vancouver, and parts of areas around King County and Pierce County are designated federally underserved, but mainly it's in Eastern and Central Washington because 2/3 of our doctors are retiring in next 5 years. And so we have not been getting the number of residents in our area. And my bill is a game changer in that rather than concentrating all the residencies in the Seattle-Tacoma area, 1,400 out of 1,500 residencies, we are now scraping off the top, best way to say it, any of the new additions they would have had for the next 5 to 6 years are going to be sent to our designated areas in Central and Eastern Washington. All this does is authorize new slots, expands the program, and basically University of Washington Medical School relinquished their oversight on this, and we created a whole new board with the brand new medical school in Yakima and any future medical schools that will be developed in this state or created in this state will have a seat at the table. They'll be part of the board of directors who are determining where residents and residencies go.
This past weekend, you hosted a small community meeting in Rockford. Can you tell me more about that?
Was very pleased to be in Rockford. It's actually the northernmost part of the 9th Legislative District. It's kind of the last community as you go north. And it turned out to be a really good session with a lot of people. We just had a broad cross-section of farmers and teachers, some principals, volunteers that have been with the election system for a long time. They had questions. A couple of mayors were there. City council people from Rockford were there. I said, if a prize were going to be given for the person who drove the farthest, it would have had to have been given to the mayor of Connell, because he's got a big rail construction project that he's interested in. So we got a flavor of the western side of the district with the mayor from Connell there, and then of course we heard a lot from constituents in the Rockford area as well. It was very good.
Now that cutoff has passed and regular committee schedules have resumed, can you provide an update on the Education Committee?
Our Education Committee is now hearing bills that passed out of the Senate. And I think some of them are very, very good bills. We had an entire committee meeting devoted to hearing Senate bills this week, and we'll caucus on those. And then the committee chair will decide if she's going to bring any of them up for a vote. So it's good to hear what's on the Senate's mind. I don't think it's any different than what we're concerned about in the House. You know, quality education, school safety. One really interesting bill, they're all interesting, but one that was very interesting to me was the Stehekin School District may have to dissolve because they don't have enough students. And right now they have what's called 4.5 student count, some students left in the middle of the year. So And the interesting thing about Stehekin is the only way you can get there is to go in by float plane or by boat. I suppose you could hike in. It's pretty isolated, and so all the school board members and the teacher, principal, superintendent, all in one person, testified at that hearing. And it's of a special interest to me because we have a very, very small school district in the 9th district also, and it's Benge. And there are just a few students there this year and every year. Again, very isolated. It's not on water, but you know, students have to ride on a bus for a long period of time. And then if it were consolidated or absorbed into a school district that's nearby, the kids would be on a bus for several hours going to school, several hours coming home from school. So it's a lot to consider when you think about what should happen when the population of a school drops, because the law states if it's under 5 students, it has to be dissolved. So Stehekin's asking for a change in the law. I think it's very reasonable to agree to that. And you know, we're talking a lot about funding. We're going to probably see a budget in, I'd say, about a week or so, maybe a little bit more than a week. And then we'll know more about how many dollars we're going to put into education to address McCleary. And just generally to do the right thing, and then we'll also be bringing forth some type of answer on what we're going to do with Initiative 1351, because I think Republicans and Democrats have been really clear that there's just, and the governor as well, that there's just not funding for Initiative 1351, which reduces class sizes K through 12.
You were recently on television discussing mental health issues. Can you share what you shared with reporters?
I think Washington is starting to address mental health issues in a more concerted way. Yes, this is another one where the Supreme Court is telling us that we aren't doing right by those with mental illness. We're boarding them, we're without treatment, without analyzing the depths of their mental illness, and that they end up either in jail or they end up in a hospital that doesn't have the skilled individuals that treat mental illness. So, you know, we've had some unfortunate shootings of individuals and those with mental illness, because perhaps, I mean, officers, I believe, are trained in de-escalating, but when the mentally ill individual has a weapon and threatens to shoot, then officers are compelled and really have no choice for their safety and for the safety of the public around them to take action. So there have been several bills. One's been signed into law. Senator Oban's bill was signed into law that would get treatment for those that have been imprisoned and those with mental illness. And another bill that is important to all of us is Joel's Law. And although it passed the House and it passed the Senate, the two versions were very different. But we've talked before about Doug and Nancy Reuter trying to, it's not going to help because their son, his life was taken by law enforcement because he had a weapon and was threatening to shoot others. And police officers were trying to protect the public and protect themselves. But the Reuters are interested in making sure this doesn't happen to another family. So the Reuters' choice in this law is that they have a family member have the ability to get a loved one temporarily committed. So that work is going on between the House and the Senate to try to resolve that. The Reuters were here last year during session, both of them, and Doug Reuter, Joel's dad, has been here all session. His mom has gone back and forth. They live in Texas. So I think that our attention to mental health issues is critical. We've had this, it's like the pendulum swinging far on almost all these issues we deal with. We can't quite get equilibrium there. If in mental illness, in years past, we used to institutionalize individuals that were deemed to have mental illness. We didn't really do the kind of analysis we need to do. Maybe we didn't even have all the tools and the knowledge that we have today about mental illness. But then we decided, a decade or two ago, okay, let's release these people. They'll be better off out in the public, in communities, and they can get treatment there. And so we closed a number of those mental health institutions, and we also let these people, we released them maybe without the support that they needed. So today we've ended up with a lot of homeless people, many of them with mental illness. And so we've kind of gone from one extreme of institutionalizing all of them to releasing many of them without the support system that they need. So I hope we can, with the legislation we have and the tools that we have and the new knowledge that we have, that we're going to be able to address this better. And that's going to make for a much better society. And morally, we have an obligation to do a better job.